Hi guys, welcome back to Crafty Quilting Designs. I hope you're fantastically well and having a really great day. So today's project is a really exciting one for me for two reasons. Well, I made it, of course. The other reason is that it is a surprise for my husband and he doesn't know anything about this at all. So I've been making this quilt all week and asking him, you know, his opinions, etc., about the layout, the colors, etc., about the quilt. So, and he's been contributing his ideas. The reason how this came about is we were going to bed and he said to me, "Are you going to sleep into the duvet, under the duvet tonight?" I was like, "No, because I get really hot and then I get cold." And then he made a sarcastic remark to me. He was like, I wonder if we knew anybody that can actually make a quilt for us. You know, those really nice quilts you see people making. Do you know anybody that does them? And so I just sat there quietly and I said nothing. I was like, oh, okay then. I know what I'm going to do. This week's project is going to be a quilt for you. So I can just shut you up. Because he was, you know, he was being a bit cheeky. Because really what he was saying is that I make all these quilts and I don't give any to the household. So I was like, okay, no problem. No problem. You know, I'll make one and shut him up. So there you go. So I've made this really beautiful quilt. He doesn't know. I'm going to call him and give it to him on camera. I want to see what his reaction is. I've actually gone through the hassle of labeling it as well. He also likes dogs a lot, so I've actually put a doggy print on the back. So I really hope he appreciates this. I've done a lot of quilting on it. It did take me, I think, at least 4 days of quilting to do this, so I was really tired by the end of it, so I did do a lot of work on this one. But I'm going to call him in now and see what he says. I have also made a cushion as well for him, because this is what he does. When he gets up in the morning, all right, he will, you know, it takes about 3-4 minutes before he actually wakes up once his eyes is open. He'll go make cups of tea for us, and he comes back with his cup of tea and his biscuits. Now, this man eats biscuits in the morning with his cup of tea. And I find that, but never mind. It was bizarre. But anyway, that's what he does. He's been doing that for years, apparently. So he makes his cup of tea. He brings me one, and he brings his little container of biscuits. He gets his cushion, put it behind his back, sit up. And, you know, he's watching the news and drinking his tea. And he likes these rich tea sort of biscuits, these dry biscuits with his cup of tea in the morning. So that's what he does. So that's why I've made a cushion as well. So he has his quilt, and he has his cushion to keep him happy. You know, I mean, he's a wonderful husband. He deserves it. So I'm going to give it to him, and I've also done the doggy print on the back as well. So I use all of the extra jelly rolls and my backing fabric to make this cushion. So it's the same color scheme because blue is his favorite color. Now that was another thing. I couldn't remember what his favorite color was. So I was like, sweetie, what's your color again? I just can't seem to remember. And he was like, it's blue. And I was like, yes, I picked the right color because I'd already started by this time. Anyway, so I'm going to bring him in, call him in, and give it to him on camera and see what his reaction is. So here we go. Carl, I just wanted to say something to you. Come on. Don't look so scared.
What?
Come on in. I want you on the camera. You're tall. Scoot down. Okay. You down? Okay, guys. This is my husband, Carl.
G'day. How you going?
Remember when you made a comment to me about the quilt?
Yeah.
On the bed? When you said if I knew somebody who actually made quilts?
Yep.
And I've made a quilt for you. This is your cushion for your back.
Thank you, baby.
And I know you like dogs. So I put a doggy print on the back.
Look at that. How beautiful is that?
Alright, I've even gone ahead and label it as well. So I can find it very quickly. it's buried. Next end, hold it for me.
We'll find it in a minute. Just bear with.
Oh my god! At the end, at the end, at the end. Right, open it out.
Okay, so we're looking at 5 ends at the moment.
Oh, there we go. I've got it. So read it.
To my darling Carl, the 28th of the 7th, 71.
And I signed it as well.
Okay.
So I'll just open it out very quickly so you can have a look of what it is.
They can see the whole thing.
There you go. Right, so sweetie, what we'd like you to do is to just go put it on the bed so we can take some pictures and share it with these guys.
Rightio, no worries.
Okay guys, so that's the end of that. So I'm going to show you now how I actually made this quilt. Hopefully he actually likes that, and I'll show you how I made it. It's really nice. What I would say though, very important that you need to be mindful of when you made this quilt, you're going to love it. Number 2, be careful of those seams in order to make sure that you have your points on your stars. You really need to make sure that your 1/4 inch seam is correct. And by the way, I forgot to tell you what the name of the quilt is. It is called Jelly Roll Star Quilt. So there you go. So obviously, you know, you're going to be making a lot of stars for this quilt. So let me take you and show you now how I made it. Okay guys, so today's jelly roll is blue and white. We got some dark blues, and we have some lights, and we have some light blues, and we have some very light. So these are cream and white, and it comes in 5 variations of color. So let's have a look. So you've got this one here, which is really pretty. So it's light blue floral on cream. This is cream as well, and we've got sort of a navy skyish blue and cream florals. We've got a really dark color here for the blue, and slightly darker. Now what we need to do is to put these into lights and darks. We also need some background fabric, and I will be using some cream, obviously, because my jelly rolls background color is cream. I have also went into my stash and used some of another color of blue because I felt that it needed something else to add there for another variation of darks. So let me show you what the strip set. So you need, as I said, lights and dark, and we need 5 of each. So we're going to do 2 sets of strip set. All right, so let me show you what I've come up with, and hopefully that's something you can take care of. Now, it's very unlikely that we will use a whole jelly roll for this particular project, but we will be using some of them for the border. So let's leave that there for now, and I will come back to these a little bit later. So I have gone ahead and cut my 2.5 of my extra fabric here. All right, so, and I felt this worked really well with the sort of color that I needed. So we need, as I said, 5. So this is my dark blue here. I'm going to start with the dark blue, and I'm going to throw in the one that I cut as well, and I'm going to go there. And then I'm going to go there again. I'm just going to move this up so you can see what I'm doing. So these are going to be stitched together as normal. What I have done is stitch 2, then then stitch 2 together, and then add the other one, and then I brought these 2 together rather than sit there and just sew them all together. So you can sew them in groups of 2. So sew these 2 together, then these 2. And then you add on. Just be mindful that you add them on in the orientation that you've laid them out to be. Okay, so you don't get a mix up. So this is my darks. All right. So I'm going to put that aside because I have to stitch this in a minute. And these are my lights, and I've already stitched these together. All right, I haven't ironed them or anything like that, but they are stitched together. So I've started and ended with a cream background color and the floral, the light blue floral, and I've layered the colors. All right, so they're obviously light in comparison to the other set. So we need 2 strip set to start with to get our stars. We're going to do 3 sizes of stars, and for the first size it's going to be a 10-inch square, hence the reason why we've got 5 here, because obviously each strip totals 2.5, but once we stitch together we then lose that 0.5 within that seam allowance. Okay, so we need 5 in order to make up a 10, and we are going to iron and flatten the seams going one way. Okay, so either you press the seams away from you or towards you, is entirely down to you, but not like that. So all the seams must go one way. All right, so we press them really nice and flat. We're going to do that for both our strip set. All right, so putting this aside now, what we need to do is to obviously sew the dark set together. And before I move on, what I was actually saying is that we're going to be needing this, the cream is for our background fabric, and we will need this alongside for our half square triangles, which I will go through once we start cutting. But the sizes of squares that we need is 10-inch. So we need 10-inch, one 10-inch of dark, one 10-inch of medium, and I'm calling these medium. So when I refer to the medium, I'm referring to this. When I say light, I'm referring to this, and when I say dark, I'm referring to this particular strip set, just so that you get that clear. All right, so I would consider this either my medium darks or my medium lights, but I would say medium, sorry, so that you're clear on what I'm referring to. Okay, so let's go now and stitch together that strip set. I mean, ideally, there's no point in demonstrating how to stitch the strip set together because you've seen me done that before. So that's what we'll do. But once I've done the other one, we will then go straight over to the ironing board, and I will press them the way I would like them to be pressed, and then we will come back to the cutting board and we will do the cutting. So I have stitched this together. As you can see, it's just simply stitching them in the layout that I initially planned. So it's dark against a floral dark, dark, floral dark. Okay, so I'm going to turn it wrong side up, and I'm going to pull it apart just like we've done before in the past, and lay those seams one way. And we're doing it this particular way because I want the seams to lay flat, obviously, but because we're going to be cutting them into half square triangles, it would be easier if all the seams are laying in one direction. And all I'm doing is just smoothing it out. I'm not putting any pressure on it at all, and just making it, I'm just literally gliding it over, because obviously when it comes to jelly rolls, it's usually cut on the bias, so I'm just literally just gliding it over so that it lays flat. And my iron is not particularly hot. You know, there's no steam at the moment, even though it might make the steam sound. It's not there because there is water in the iron, but I haven't added any steam to it. So I'm going to turn it right side up now. And again, I'm going to check that the folds, there's no folds on the seams there, and it's nice and it's literally flat. Okay, so I'm now going to add a little bit of steam on this particular one here. I'll do this for both of the strips set. And once you have laid, or I should say press, the seams one way, it literally sort of open up these seams on the right side. So it automatically stretches out quite easily. So it's kind of effortless in a sense once you get to this stage. So make sure that you do, that you iron the wrong side first. Let's do this one again. So again, make sure that you stitch them together in the way that you want the half square triangles to be. Just press it all the way, and again I'm just gliding it open. Try not to let the seams fall back on you or towards you. So this particular way we want the seams going away from us. And I'm just gently pulling on it really, so that it, you know, it becomes flat really. So right, on the other side now. Now again, I will repeat the same thing which I've said before in other lessons. Is the reason for making sure that we open up is because naturally, because there is a long strip, it tends to fold in on itself. And so when we cut it and then we stitch it together, the idea or is very likely that the block size will be incorrect because it's not open up properly. So hence the reason I say make sure that it's really flat, so that the fabric itself is flat, and once you cut it you get an accurate cut. So again, a little bit of pressure if you want, but just gently pull the fabric so that seams open. And again, if you can feel that you can glide it like this without any bumpiness, and when I say bumpiness, because if it's not flat, you wouldn't be able to glide it over. So like doing that there, I can feel it bumping already. But if I pull it, it glides over a lot more easily, and that way I know all the seams are actually open. So just be careful of that. This is an important stage, so make sure that you do this properly. As I said, you can lose some particular sizing there when you actually cut, so that's important. And then you literally wonder, well, why is it that the blocks are different sizes? So that could be a possibility. All right, so let's go over now to the cutting board and I'll show you how to cut all of these up. Okay, so let's do some cutting now. For our stars, we're going to be needing one set of 10-inch square cuts for our star. So I have already cut my square out for my star, but I'll just go through with you. Now all of the cuts are the same, it is just simply different sizes. I am going to show you now the 8-inch cut for the star. So we're going to make 3 sets of stars. We're going to do a 10-inch a large star, which starts from a 10-inch block. Then we're going to do a medium star, which starts out from an 8-inch, and then we're going to do a small star, which starts off from a 5-inch. Okay, so that will make a lot more sense to you once I show you here what I'm going to do. Now, in order for us to get the 8-inch square, we still need 5, because if I measure 1 to 8 here, it literally stops on the end of that jelly roll strip there. And what that will mean is that we will have that strip there to contend with. So it's better that we go beyond that and we can find our 8-inch in between the jelly roll here. So I'm going to make my first cut, then I'm going to cut off the selvage just to make sure everything is nice and neat, and we don't have that particular selvage in. Right, so that's my first cut. Then I'm going to count 8 over, as I usually do. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now I'm not using the board. Well, I am using the board, but you know what I mean. So I'll count again just to be on the safe side. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So that's 8. And I want to measure that properly there. Make sure it's lined up. Okay, so that's 1, Now for the medium stars, we need 4 stars altogether. But I'm just going to demonstrate one for now, and obviously you will cut them down. Okay, so I'm going to cut another one. And again, I'm going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I've put it on exactly where it's supposed to be. I just like to count just to make sure it's correct, because I really hate wasting fabric. So always count twice, cut once. It's an old saying anyway. So I'm going to put this to the side for now, because obviously I can keep going and get another, but I just want to show you how to make 1 star for now, and then you would know, because remember, it is the same star, it is just different sizes that we will be doing. So I'm going to go over to this one now, and the same applies. So I'm just go this, make sure it's nice and level there in your view. And again, I'm going to get a clean cut so that I have a straight edge to work with, and get into that habit of doing that. Make sure your cut's nice and clean so that it's straight, and you know you started off correctly. So get rid of that and count over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now obviously it doesn't look like a square at the moment, it looks rectangle, but we are going to square this off. So this now is my medium that I'm actually cutting. All right. And I need another one as well. Just make sure it's lined up there and count 1, 2. So I'm lining up the edge of my fabric to the edge of the line here, just to make sure it's nice and straight. Now I could use my other ruler and just simply put it down there, get the 8 point there and simply cut it, but I prefer to do it this particular way. I more use this ruler for squaring up or squaring down the blocks, but I tend to use the board and this long ruler for cutting. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, so I'm going to put this aside for now because I've got to go back to this. So I'm going to put that to the side there. Right, now I'm going to go to my lights now, and I need to do the same thing. I need 2 of these. Now, for this one, let's have a look. I've folded the fabric. I'm going to check and see if I can actually get my 8 cut just from folding the fabric this way rather than having to open up the fabric. Now again, this was from my stash, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Excellent. So I've got enough there. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Lovely. So from folding the fabric, I can get 2 cuts quite easily. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Again, double check. And what I'm going to do is just finger press it there. Open it up. I'm just going to make sure, because I need to get rid of the salvage here, so I'm just going to make sure I have enough. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Excellent. So I'm just going to cut that salvage off and then cut it down in the middle. Now I would say just take your time, don't rush this, because obviously we don't want to mess it up, and as I said, I hate wasting fabric. Move one over, and I can just count from here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and my last cut there. Now even though I've cut this before, because I have been cutting all morning, I just like to confirm to myself that it's right, and that's the important thing here. Now going back to this particular one, what I am going to do now is square this block up to 8 inches. So I'm going to get my ruler now, and because I know my edges here are already straight, I'm just going to take that 8-inch line there and literally just simply put it on this edge here, and it should line up there already. Now what I am doing now is just making sure that this area here, this jelly roll, it's equated for that 8-inch. So I'm just going to move it down slightly so that I know it's equated amount that I'm cutting off and the same amount that is left as well. So I'm literally averaging, cutting in the middle of that strip to get my 8 inches. So I'm going to line it up again, and that looks fine to me. I can see my 8 inches down there, and I can see the top there, so I'm going to bring it down just a little bit. Right, and I'm going to cut it. Right, and you will need a new actual blade in your rotary cutter for this, because obviously we're going to be cutting through some seams quite a lot, so we needed the blade to be nice and sharp. And notice that I've turned my new cut, or my fresh cut, to the bottom, and the reason I've done that is because now I can put my 8-inch line at the bottom here on that cut and line it up so that I know it's level off and that cut is going to be straight, and I'm simply just going to cut it there now. Okay, now what we're going to do now is take one medium light and one light and put them front sides together. Now these should match up because they're both 8 inches squared. All right, now what I have done is just go to the iron and just press it, and the reason I've done that is so that the fabrics can just slightly stick together. Obviously it's not going to stick permanently, but the heat will keep it together, because what I'm going to do is sew a 1/4 inch all the way around this particular square. So that's one all ready to go. The next one, again, we're going to do the same thing. So again, I'm going to do the same thing and measure that 8-inch line there. And you can see why now that I've actually used the 5 strips, because if I used 4, it would be like that, and I would literally be cutting on that seam line. Okay, now I could just leave it off and do the 4, but I wanted to have that different color in there, that last color in there, because my 10-inch would have incorporated the all 3 colors. So I wanted to keep that the same thing for the 8-inch. But if you want to just keep 3 in yours for your 8, by all means go right ahead and do that. And it literally just give you 8-inch if you use the 4. All right, but I wanted to get that last color in there, so hence the reason I decided to do that. And also, just so that you know this, once you've made your strip set, you literally, for your 10-inch, you're literally only going to do 1 set of cuts for the 10-inch, whereas the 8-inch you're going to use the whole strip set to get that, to get all of your 4 stars. I hope that makes sense to you, right? So hence the reason why I continued with using the 5 strip sets together, because I had already measured the 5 strip set, did my first 10-inch cut, and then started with my 8-inch. Right, so again, measure 8 there, make sure it's in the middle, and I'm going to cut it. We turn it around, bring it down to the end, so again line up the end of the fabric on that 8-inch line and then cut it across. Okay, so again the same thing's going to happen. We're going to take this one now, so lights and dark, front sides together, and again make sure it lays on top there nicely. And we're going to go to the ironing board, and I'm not going to show you this because I'm just going to just literally press it so that it literally stays together. And again, stitch a 1/4 inch all the way around, and then we will cut that open. And then we've got one more to do, and this is the darks. So the dark and the light now goes together, front sides together. And again I will do the same thing, but before I do that I obviously need to trim this up. So I wouldn't advise you to do this, okay? Don't put them together and trim them. You can if you want, but I prefer not to. I prefer to cut them individually. And yes, it may take some time, but at the end of the day I know I haven't made a mistake, and I feel happy that it's been cut accurately. So it's entirely down to you, but I mean it's not much cutting anyway, it's just well 16 altogether that you need to make, so it's not a big deal. But just take your time. If you know you're going to double or triple cut, it's entirely down to you, but just be careful. But I like just to make sure that it's done properly, so then I know there is no issues when it comes to lining everything up at the end. And when I say at the end, I'm referring to actually making that block. I always think that the objective is to make sure the block lays really flat. Okay, so that one there, and then this one, the same thing. Again, 8-inch. Line it up on the cut line. Make sure you equate your size there. Now when you go to stitch your jelly rolls together, just make sure that you are on a small stitch length. Alright, so it shouldn't be wide, it shouldn't be long I should say, because you need that stitch length to be nice and tight. So 2 will be ideal. Anything I think bigger than that, we run the risk of it starting to undo, because remember we are going to be cutting into these seams, so we need the stitching to remain intact. And I can see my board is giving up, it's sticking in there. Let me just take that little bit off. And this blade is very sharp. Look at that. It's just cut into my board. Alright, so these now go front sides together. And the same applies. And I'm only checking to make sure that I've laid the seams going the same way. So this one is going up and this one is going down. So I'm going to turn that one that way. So they're both going up. Alright, and again, excuse me, we're going to iron this so that it's nice and flat and do a stitch all the way around. Now once you've done that, we need to cut it open. So we're going to go over to the sewing machine now, and I'm going to demonstrate sewing one, and then I will come back and cut them open so you can see what we actually get. A lovely surprise. So I have the dark and the medium together here, and they've been ironed so that it sits literally on top of each other nicely. Now what I'm going to do is sew a 1/4 inch seam all the way around. I already put my 1/4 inch foot on, and I'm just going to do that as normal. Now the reason why I'm starting with this one is that you need to just make sure that these seams here lay flat when you are sewing this. So you need to be concerned about the seams on top and the seams at the bottom. Okay, and the reason for this is to ensure that once you started the quilting, that everything is flat as possible. Now I think my fabric has gone down a little bit there. Let's see if this is okay. Now just make sure and take your time and guide it through. Now this is what I'm talking about, so we don't want that to happen, so I'm just going to lift it up. There you go, and it's gone down nicely, and just continue to sew. Now when you're sewing, I would advise to make sure that you actually sew off, so don't pivot. And the reason why I'm saying that is because upon pivoting you may not necessarily get back your equated 1/4 inch seam. All right, so I would advise just to sew all the way off, cut your thread, and then go around again with your 1/4 inch, just to make sure that it's correct. By all means, if you think that pivoting is going to be fine for you, then go right ahead and do that. But I have been sewing all the way off and starting again. And again, come back down. Just be mindful of these seams again, making sure that they lay flat. Sew all the way off, and to line up again and continue. Okay, so I've got 3 more to do, so I'm going to go do that now, and let's go over to the cutting board and I'll show you how to cut these open. Now these are ready. In total you need 12 of these, okay, because we are making 4 medium stars, so you need 12. I'll repeat that. So you need a medium light together with a dark, you need a light together with a dark, and you need a light together with a medium. Okay, so you need 12 of these in total. Now we're going to cut these into 4 at a time half square triangles, and the way you do that is get your ruler, measure from point to point, and you're going to cut it. Now the easiest way to do this is on a rotating mat. I haven't got one, but I do use my smaller mat for this purpose. So I'm going to put it there and line it up. And again cut. Now I'm not going to move the fabric, but I am going to move the board. And I'm going to do that again. Make sure it's lined up point to point. And cut. Okay, and now because we have stitched all the way around with our 1/4 inch seam, if we open it back we can clearly see our half square triangles. So we have 4 all together. So you need to cut all of those up. Now I have some prepared already to show you how to do the star. So I'm going to put these aside. So you know what, I'm going to do this again just to ensure that you know what I'm referring to. So I'm going to use the medium lights and the darks together. Let's open up that one and see what it looks like. Okay, so again point to point. Now these are very easy to make, and this is the reason why I said you need a nice sharp rotary blade, because obviously we're going through all of those seams there, so you need it to go through nice and smooth. And again once I open them up, you can see our beautiful half square triangles. Absolutely lovely. Now the next important thing to do after you've cut all of your triangles up, these needs to be cut down at 5 inches squared. All right, so the 8-inch squared half square triangles, so once we cut them down, we need to cut them or trim them down to 5-inch square. All right, now for the 10-inch ones, we need to trim these down to 6.5, and I've put a note there to remind me, because all I have done is taken my 10-inch square and cut them down into that half square triangles. Okay, but I haven't trimmed them down as yet. So the 10-inch needs to be trimmed down. Once you've cut that cut the 4 open, they need to be trimmed down to 6.5, and as I said, I've given myself a real reminder there to do that. Okay. Now going back to the other sets of triangles, once you've trimmed them down, it's time to lay them out. So I have some here already cut and trimmed down to the 5-inch square. I've also taken off the dog ears out of them. Now before I move on to showing you how to lay these out, what I want you to bear in mind is that, as I said before, we are compiling 3 different types, sizes of the same square. So it's the same skill set that we're using over and over again. Nothing is literally changed. It's the same skill set, but we're just reducing the size of the stars. So as I said, our first cut of fabric is a 10-inch square, then we move on to an 8-inch, and then the last one is a 5-inch. Okay, so what you also need to be mindful of is that we also need some corner squares, and whatever size you trim down your squares to be, these also need to be the same size. So my half square triangles are 5 inches squared. These also need to be 5 inches squared. Okay, so we will need in total for our medium square, our medium star, we will need 48 pieces altogether, because we are cutting down 3 each of the of these that we put together. All right, so we're making 3 for each star, so that's 12 altogether, and then once we trim them down, we should have 48 squares. Now we will have 48 squares plus these here as well. Okay, and in total we will need 16. Now just to make life easier for everyone, there will be a pattern to download, so that way you don't have to remember all of these measurements. All right, now let's move on to laying these out. So I have, as I said, I've ironed them nice and flat, and I've also trimmed off my dog ears, okay, as you can see there. So for example, this one here, I wanted to make sure when you come to this one, don't press the seams that way, don't force it that way. Yeah, keep it nice and flat going towards the plain fabric, or in this case the light fabric. All right, now let's lay this out. Now what you need to take first is these ones here. These are the squares that you're looking for first, these 4 squares, and this one compiles of the dark fabric and the medium light fabric. Okay, and we're going to lay them out into a pinwheel. Now don't let it confuse you, because obviously there's a lot of patterns going here in terms of the jelly rolls, so try not to let it confuse you. So I'm going to lay that one out there, and I'm going to lay that there. I'm going to get this one opposite, and this one again there. Okay, so what you need to be mindful of is that these fabrics are not touching. So this is not touching this one, so the lights are not touching. So you have light, dark, light, dark, light, dark, light, dark. Okay, that's what we're aiming at. Now if you want to turn it that way, then you will have light against light, and that's not what we want, and you'll have dark against dark, and immediately that tells you it's incorrect. So just to ensure, you know, do that to yourself just to make sure it's right. Again, light, dark, light, dark, light, dark, light, dark. All right, and just move this up a little bit. I want to make sure you get the whole picture. Okay, so I'm going to grab these extra now, and these are all of the other ones I just literally just cut. So now we're going to put on our legs, and so we need to take these same fabric and match them to the first one. So this one is here, so I'm going to match it and just move those out the way. So I'm going to match it, but I don't want it making this pattern, so it must be turned this way. Okay, so it must continue in that particular layout. I'm going to find this one now, and again this particular pattern goes that way, but if I lay it up I can already see it's incorrect because I need it to go this way. Okay, so this pattern against that pattern, this pattern against that pattern. Let's find this one now. Again, that's incorrect. It needs to go this way. So it makes that line there. This one, this way. So all you need to do is find that particular pattern and use it. This one. Again, if I put it like that, it's incorrect because it's giving me that sort of diamond shape, and I don't want that. So again, it doesn't look right. Okay, the two patterns or the two prints are not next to each other, so turn it again. There you go, you found it. All right, so then this one again doesn't look right, so you need to change it. That same pattern is flowing outward. Let's find this one now. Again, incorrect. That's what you're looking for. And the last one goes like that. So as long as you have the patterns touching each other, you should be okay. Now this is where our corner squares come in. So one goes there, one goes there, one goes there, and one goes there. And hopefully you can actually see your star there. Let's try and get that in the picture for you. There you go, that is your star. Okay, so as long as you ensure that both colors are touching each other, then you're okay. Alright, so we need to do that now for all of our half square triangles to make up our stars. Alright, so what I'm going to do now is stitch this together, and I'll show you how to do that, and then we will move on to making the large star so that you have an idea of how to do that one also. Okay, so let's go do that now. Okay, so the star you're looking at is the largest star. Okay, this is the star that is made from the 10-inch squares with the lights, the darks, and the mediums. So remember, these are the mediums, these are the darks, and of course these are the lights. Now before I take you over to the sewing machine, what I wanted to show you, because obviously you wouldn't see me taking it from its layout, you would just see me sewing it together, but I wanted to point out the way in which it should be stitched together. So you're going to start with your 4 patches in the middle here, and of course you're going to sew them front sides together using a 1/4 inch seam. Let's imagine for a minute that we've done that. Okay, so once you stitch it together, put it back its original place. And the reason why I say that is to avoid you getting yourself confused, because sometimes if you remove this and you start adding on your legs, that is when the confusion can take place. So stitch your 4 patches together, let's call it that, put it back in its original place. Okay, now we're going to start sewing the legs. We're going to start with these 2 up here, and again front sides together, and we sew it the 2 down at the bottom, front sides together, and resew it. Once you've done that, you add them on again. So you add this one on first, then you put it back. You add this with the other one, you put it back. One thing to be mindful of is that if you notice for a second that your stars or your legs are like this, it is incorrect. What you need to remember, even when you're at the sewing machine, is that you must see a V. Okay, that is your mark you're looking for. If you see a V, then you know you are stitching it together correctly. So a V there, a V there, and a V there. Okay, now let's imagine again that all 8 have been stitched together, so you should have this long row. Now what you want to do next is again stitch these 2 other legs together, front sides together, open them back out, then you add this one on, again front sides together, then you add this one on, front sides together. So you then should have your 4 row together, then you fold the whole thing over and stitch it together. So by this time you should have 1, 2, 3 rows, and then you do the same for the next row. Okay, now what I would say is to press in between each addition of the row. For example, once you've made your first 4 patch, make sure you get a nice hot iron in there so that the seams lay nice and flat. And the seam I'm really concerned about here is this junction of these 4 squares, because that's going to get bulky. Make sure you nest your seams so that it lays really nice and flat. Now once I have stitched it, what I have done is turn it on the wrong side and put a nice hot steam of the iron right in the middle of that area there, because as I said, that can get a little bit bulky because we've got those 4 pieces of fabric coming together. Alright, so then you will open it back out and you will continue to do the same. Again, once you've added on your first 2 legs, again you would add a little bit of steam there, a little bit of steam there, and again smoothen it out. So for this particular one, I would definitely say when you form your 4 patch, you iron, you form another patch up there, you iron, and the same applies there, and the same applies for all of them. So at each stage, press it and make sure that you press in so that the seams can be nested, and that way you should not lose any of your points. Everything should match up really nicely. Okay, so as I said, you will see me sewing, but in terms of doing those multitasking in between the stitching and ironing is probably going to be lost. All right, so I just wanted to point that out for you so that you are clear. Remember, start with your 4 patch first, put it back on the table or wherever you lay out, okay, and then start sewing all of your other bits together. And the reason for that is to ensure that you do not get the layout confused. If you want to lay it out next to your sewing machine, perfect. That way you don't have to move. All right, so because if you get it wrong, trust me, I know you will. You will unpick it because it will be incorrect. All right, so just be mindful of that. Take your time and stitch it together very slowly. Also, there's a lot of seams to go through, so make sure that you have a, I would say, a short stitch length, again, to ensure that it doesn't unravel. Don't do a large stitch length just in case you know you have to unpick it. Just be mindful of where the layouts are, pick them up correctly, and stitch them. So I think the best idea really is if you can lay it out right next to the sewing machine so that you can stitch, put back, pick up, stitch, put back, etc., etc., so that way there is no confusion. Okay, so let's go over to the sewing machine now, and I will start sewing that. Okay guys, so let's get started on this. So remember, we're stitching together the 10-inch, and I keep saying 10-inch because I just want you to understand that when I'm referring to it as 10-inch, I'm actually referring to the start of the cut. Okay, so the start of the cut the fabric. So these are the half square triangles. That's what's made from the 10-inch square with the lights, darks and mediums. Okay, that we trim down to 6.5. Now I'm going to sew these together now, right sides together, and I have picked it up in the way in which I intend to stitch it together. Just make sure everything is lined up. And cut. Now what I'm going to do now is to open it up and just double check everything's okay, and I'm going to go iron this to that side, so to the left side. So my ironing board is just right next to me, and that's what I'm going to do, and just add a little bit of steam. Okay, and I'm going to put it back in its original place so that I know where it came from. And I've picked up the other two, and again I'm double checking, making sure I know it's right, because I know the other side is missing up there and it's two opposite, and I can see dark, light, front sides together, and the same applies. Now just be mindful of all the seams, take your time and go through them quite easily. Now don't rush this part, take your time, because we really want all of the seams to nest properly, and we don't want the block to be short. Now I have a little bit of a problem there. I can see that my fabric has gone into, and I'm going to cut that, lift it up, and it always happens, it tends to go in. So I'm just going to make that a little bit longer, and I'm going to move up slightly. So if that happens to you, you just take it all out, cut your thread and start again. But to make sure that I have stitched the edge, what I'm actually going to do is just back stitch there. I'm just going to do a reverse stitch just to make sure that it stitches it. All right. I'm going to cut that out just to make sure and start again. Line it up. My machine has a tendency of moving the fabric, so I don't know if yours does that, but just be careful. So again, you don't want that, because that can be a bulky problem when it comes to quilting. So press a foot up, and what I usually do, if you have your stiletto next to you, it's fine, but I have my pin cushion, so I just use the pin and just put it down, and then just continue to sew it. So just little things like that you know can be a little bit of an issue, so just be mindful of those things. Right, and just open it, double check, and I'm going to do the same and just make sure, put a little bit of steam on that particular joint there, so that everything's okay. And I'm going to put it back the way it was just to double check. Right, so I've got both pieces now, and I'm going to double check that everything is okay there, and I can see my pinwheel there already. All right, so just double check. The last thing you want to do is to get your unpick out and then having to unpick, so just do that, just double check. All right, so I'm going to do this front sides together now, and because I've already pressed those seams there that I just created, everything should nest properly. But another step that I usually take is to make sure those seams are nesting. So I stop, I take a keen interest in it and just make sure it's nesting there. I also take my pin, and I'm using just these normal silver flathead pins, and I'll tell you why I've used those. Now I could go on for one of these ones here, which is fine, but the reason why I've gone for those just silver pins is because I can literally put that under the iron and it wouldn't be a problem. So I'm going to just put the iron on that spot there now, just to make sure that stays down really nicely, so I don't have any problems there. add a bit of steam, and it's nice and flat, so I'm just gonna ensure it's lined up at the top. Again, line it all up, and so. You can hear those joints going over there in the machine, and I'm not going fast, I'm literally creeping. Usually I don't sew this slow, but because I know this is an important stage, I'm just going to make sure and take my time, and I'm double checking to make sure these fabrics are laying right on top of each other, and align them and just continue. Look at that. I'm just going to let that go. See how the presser foot actually moves it. So you just need to check things like that. So I'm just going to go back over it now and just show you that there. So things like that, because of the joints, that will happen. The presser foot will budge it off. So you just need to notice those little things. I'm just going to go back up a little bit way where I can see my stitch line there already for the 1/4 inch, and just continue. And go over that properly and just hold it in place. So I've literally allowed that to happen, so you can see these are the little knickknacks and little problems that you experience with things like this, so just be mindful of that. So I'm just going to open this now. Let me remove that pin, and just check it. So all those points meet together really nicely in the middle there. Okay, another thing you need to be mindful of is you need to make sure that you cross that horizontal line there nicely on the top of the 2 stitch line there that meets with that straight stitch line. So you make sure you hit that point, and that's what's happened there. Hence the reason why you've got really nice points in the middle there. So that's what we're aiming for with all of your points. Just take your time and do it properly. It's no rushing. This is the biggest star, so you know any mishaps is going to be shown. It will be visual, so just be mindful of things like that. And even if it is a mistake, just tell them it was meant to be like that. It's your original style of doing stuff. Right, so a bit of steam now in the middle of that so that it lays really nice and flat, and I'm going to put it back in its original position, whereby all of the legs are laying in the right orientation. So now I've picked up the bottom legs now, and again I'm double checking that it's in the right place, and I can see already that might be a problem. Okay, I don't have my V. I need to have my V, so I'm going to put it back down with the others, align it properly, and this is what you need to do. Don't sit here and do that. Don't mess around with it. Put it back and just double check, make sure it's right. Now I know it's a V, but I'm going to double check with myself that it's in the right orientation. Yes, and that's exactly what it is. All right, so just double check. Again, front sides together. Now I reckon by the time you finish making this quilt, you will be very excellently confident in making this hunter square, sorry, this hunter star. You will know at the top of your head by now because you would have made so many for this quilt, and that's really good because repetition is the key, and it helps you to remember, you know, the steps and, you know, the little knickknacks that you need to know to avoid any issues. So again, line it up. And I always tend to double check with that lining up of the actual presser foot there. I have a tendency of always nudging it with my fingers because I put my fingers so close to the actual feet that I always tend to nudge it and the fabric moves, so I double check that I've done that. It's such as my personal habit, really. So again, take your time. Same applies. I am now going to check it, go to the iron, press it that way, so that I know that that stitch line, that seam is nice and flat. And I'm going to bring back my 4 patch now, and I'm going to line it up and just double check that it's supposed to be the right way. So if I am doing that automatically, I should realize it's incorrect. Why? Because I haven't got the similar patterns touching each other. I have the light fabric touching the dark and the medium, so that means I must turn it around. So therefore I will have the correct fabrics touching each other. And again, front sides together, and the same applies. Again, it's all nested there already because I have ironed it, and I'm still going to put a pin in there. Okay, just to make sure it's done properly, because again, as I said, this is the largest star, so we want it to be looking beautiful because it's going to sit right in the middle of the quilt. So pin that together, and again I'm going to add a little bit of steam there just to ensure again that it stays put. And I'm going to sew now. Hear those lumps there. And help it along, yeah? Just when I say help it along, ease the fabric into the machine, especially when you're coming up to the joints there, where all those fabric meet. Just take your time and go over it slowly. And again, if you notice that little bit there sticking out, sometimes the fabric moves up. So what I usually do is take my finger and slide down this one to the bottom. So I'm just pulling it down slightly so that it stays put. Because remember that the jelly rolls are biased. So there's a little give of stretch in them. Don't overdo it. You don't want the top to be wobbly. Okay, don't overdo it. As you can tell, it's lining up nicely, so there's no great need to pull it. Okay, but all I'm doing literally just making sure I'm holding the one at the bottom nice and firm so that it stays in place, so that it stitches together properly. And again, guide it through, because sometimes the presser foot can move it. Okay, right, so that's looking okay. Get rid of that pin, and that's fine. Again, nicely meet that, and I'm going to put a little bit of iron on that as well. Bit of steam, make sure it's nice and flat. And now I'm going to put it back and pick up the other legs to the top. And what we're creating here now is our 8 full patch in the middle, that long bit in the middle. Again, I can see my V, so I know it's correct. Front sides together. Lovely. That's open. Double check that. Again, do the same thing. A bit of a press on there. Bring back my fabric in with my 6 patch. Okay, and now I'm going to add on my 2. Again, I can see it's correct and all lined up properly. Front sides together. It's nested properly again because I have ironed it in between. And I'm not ironing the whole thing. I'm just literally putting the iron on those points there. All right. I will iron the whole block once I've completed making the block. And that's what I've done for all of them. So it's only the joints where those seams meet, where I'm actually putting that heat so that it lays nice and flat. And again, I'm just going to continue. I'm checking that everything is nested properly there, and that looks fine. And my needle, I can tell, is unthreaded, so let me thread this now. I'm coming up to that joint, so I'm trying to make sure it's in there properly. Again, do the same. Notice I slid it down because I can see it moving. Okay, let's check that. So really, the middle is one of the important bits there. So there you go. That looks absolutely brilliant. So I'm going to add a bit of steam again on this. And what we're going to do now is literally add on the others. Okay, so I'm going to do that, and then I'll show you the completed block. Okay, so let's move forward with how the stars actually look. So we've compiled 3 sets of stars, in the sense that 3 different types of stars. All right, so the one we stitched together was the largest star to go into the middle of the quilt, and this star is called a hunter's star. All right, so we've made our jelly rolls out of a hunter's star. Okay, so that's the one we compiled together. The other star that we will be making, before I go into that one, so we also need another 4 of this size of the hunter's star as well. And again, all of the requirements will be in the box below for your pattern. Okay, so we need 4 of the hunter star, again this size, made very much in the exact same way. The only difference is that it is a different size blocks that makes this particular size of the hunter star. All right, so we need 4 of those in total. The next star that we will be making is a friendship star. Okay, so that's the friendship star. So far that's 3 stars altogether, and just bear in mind that all of them use half square triangles. Okay, for the largest star and the medium star, yes, it uses 4 at a time half square triangles, meaning that we put the 10-inch square together, front sides together, sew all the way around, and then cut them into triangles. And we did that for this particular size as well, and this again was the 8-inch star. All right, however, with this one we made 2 at a time half square triangles, and this time to make this one, what you actually do is get your block size, i.e. this one is a 4-inch square, and you draw a line right down the middle. I'm going to bring that closer, and obviously there's a different size for the square as well. You draw a line right down the middle of that particular 4-inch square, and then you stitch on either side at 1/4 of an inch. And again, that's another way of making half square triangles, and with those you get 2 at a time. So that was the technique used to make the friendship star. So 2 at a time, half square triangles. Okay, we also made a sawtooth star, and this one has a 9 patch in the middle. All right, so again, we did use our jelly rolls. I used that particular fabric, that yardage, that accent color that I didn't have in my jelly roll, that I wanted something else contrasting that would actually work. So this contrasting fabric here, this accent color, is what I used throughout the entire quilt. Okay, and this one again is made with the 2 at a time, again half square triangles. All right, so far we've had our hunter star, friendship star, and sawtooth star with a 9 patch in the middle. Our last star so far is this one, and again this is the smallest star we've made, and again this one is made in the same way, but in this case I've used singular half square triangles, and I'll quickly demonstrate how to do this one. All right, and again I have a 4 patch within this particular star, but they're all have legs, of course, because they're stars. All right, now let me show you how to do that one very quickly. Now, to start off, to make your 4 patch or even your 9 patch, you will sew your jelly rolls together in your long strips. So you'll take your long strips and you'll sew them together, and that's what I did. So let's say, for example, that is a jelly roll there. I sewed 2 pieces together and I cut 2.5 to make that particular length. So in total I've got 2 pieces there. I then did the same thing, and all I'm going to do is put them together like that and stitch them so that I have opposite colors next to each other. All right, now to make my half square triangles, these tiny ones, the only difference is that again I've cut the same cut, 2.5 square for both my solid color and my light color here, or my dark blue and my light color here, to get the legs. Okay, and you remember that you need the darkest color to show the impact of the legs. If it's too light, it's going to be faded into the background and it would not necessarily show up those points. Okay, so this is what I mean by that there. Okay, so we need those strong colors in order to allow the legs to show the formation of the star. Now going back to this now, so you sew these together. With this one, the way you make it, you draw a line, and I've used heat erasable pen, so once I've ironed this, it's going to disappear. However, we are going to simply cut alongside that line, and you're going to cut 1/4 inch. All right, and then this obviously is scrapped now, right? And then you open it up, iron again to the dark side, and trim off any dog ears that you may possibly end up having. Again, remember that jelly rolls are very stretchy because they have bias edges on them. Okay, so that is simply my star there. So to lay this out now, and this is exactly the way you would do for your sawtooth star. All right, so this is the smallest of the two, and it's exactly the same way you've done for the hunter star. Okay, the only difference with the hunter star is that what we were aiming for was to have the colors match up in that particular way there, so it draws the attention from those legs, so the legs extend right into the middle of the star. So going back to this one now, you need to ensure again that you have your V. So always position your half square triangles with your tip at the top and the other color in the middle. Okay, so you're aiming for that V. Every time you are aiming for that V. And looking at this now, because I'm laying it out in a different direction altogether in terms of how I'm standing. So that doesn't look right. So we need to find it and make sure that is correct. Again, that's upside down because the V is facing the other way. So we need to turn it around. Again, and that V is that way round. This one, again, same thing. Now, what I forgot to mention to you, I'm not sure if I did, but I just, as I saw it there, just make sure I say that when you do your jelly rolls, what I did to ensure that it was easier to stitch together, I lay the strips on top of each other and then I cut it. And then what I did, I carefully picked it up and just go to the iron with it and just stamp it. The reason why I applied the heat to it is that it allows it to stick together. So it's a lot more easier to sew under the presser foot, because sometimes it can move about. But as I said, if you put both jelly rolls on top of each other, cut them, or you can line it all up, jelly roll on top of each other, take it straight to the iron, and then iron the whole strip together. Again, just a warm iron, just to glide it over. What we want is that the heat, just to keep the fabrics together, and then you cut your 2.5. And again, that allows it to stay a lot more easily. And then you take your ruler, using your pen, and draw it from point to point. And again, you stitch on that line. Okay, that now becomes your stitch line, and when it comes to cut, you cut a 1/4 inch away from that particular line. Okay, now so going back to this layout here, so again, if I do that, it's incorrect. I need to make sure I can see that V there. And my last two, which I haven't done this one as yet because I wanted to show you how to do that. So I'm just going to put that there for now. Okay, now once you've done that, now we're going to stitch this the exact same way as we made the large square. So moving these aside, what we're going to do, stitch these two together first. You put on your top legs, then you put on your bottom legs. Okay, once you've done that, you then now need your square fabric. You will stitch these whole 3 rows together, then you add your 4th. The same applies for this one. You stitch there and you stitch there. Once you've done that, you add them together like so, and you literally have your sawtooth with your 4 patch in the middle, and that's how you make that one. All right, so you can just swap this around so you can actually see the layout a lot more easily. This is just trimmings from the other ones, and I'm just trying to, so you can actually see what I'm referring to. Okay, so again, you can keep these trimmings or you can get rid of them. I'm not sure what I'm going to do at the moment, but I do feel guilty throwing those away if I have to be honest. Okay, so that's how you create your star. Okay, exactly the same way as the hunters. The only difference is that we haven't got any fabrics in the middle here to match up because we've got a 4 patch here. If you want, you can put a solid color there for yours. It's entirely down to you. All right, so that's where we're at the moment. The next thing that I did, once I've made my friendship star, this comes out to 10-inch square, and this one I think comes out to 12-inch square. Again, there'll be a pattern for you, so not to worry about the sizes. What I went on to do was to add a border with the same contrasting fabric from my Jelly Roll collection onto the actual star, and I thought it looks really nice. It just helps again lift it, it stands out and allows you to focus on it. I also did the same for the small sawtooth, and that's what it looks like. So again, you can use up your fabrics for your jelly roll from the same collection to pull it all together so that it looks very uniform. So the next objective now is to lay all of the blocks out, and then I will show you what that looks like. Now there's a lot of squares, and obviously we will need some yardage in order to join all of this together, to pull it together into a complete whole quilt top, because obviously all of the squares have been made separately. So then we need to join this together using our background fabric so that we can sew it together as a massive, to use that word, a very large square for a quilt top. Okay, so let's do that now and I'll show you what the quilt top looks like. Alright, so you're just looking at sort of half size of the quilt top at the moment. I just wanted to take you through very briefly of how I compiled it so that you know how to stitch it together. So, excuse me, you've got your first 3 stars at the top here. So you have your medium size hunter, you have your sawtooth in the middle with the 9 patch, and you have your other hunter star at the back over there. So these together form the first 3 rows. So these will stitch together. Remember, we need to bring up each size of this one here in particular to the size of the particular hunter star. So again, I used my Jelly Roll strips to make up the square of that star. So remember, this is my accent color. This 9 patch in the middle here is the actual Jelly Roll. This is background fabric, but this on the edge here is Jelly Roll because this color also came with the Jelly Roll. All right, and this Jelly Roll is from Calf Kitson of London. Absolutely beautiful floral blue, very, very lovely colors. I actually fell in love with them when I saw it. And again, the hunter star again was made with the accent color. Okay, and again, so all of them equates to a size, I think approximately 22 inches. So the really nice big blocks. Now moving on to the smaller ones here, because remember this is the original size of the small sawtooth. Okay, and I think this was 8 inches or 10. I think once you've taken down the seams and everything else, it obviously trims down. And again, this is the Jelly Roll, and again Jelly Roll to make up the size of these blocks, which I think came up to 12 or 12 and a half. I can't remember exactly. All right, which I then did the same for this one. So again, whatever size you come out at in terms of making up that particular star, they all must be the exact same size so that you can stitch them together. So I would say what I actually did was add on my Jelly Rolls and then put the blocks together and then worked out how much you need to actually sew on. If you notice, on this size it's smaller, so it's a smaller strip of Jelly Roll I had to add on here to make up this block, whereas this one was quite different. What you could do is make this smaller and then add on the same width here, but it's entirely down to you. I just thought it was easier just to use the full width of the Jelly Roll and then add on a smaller strip of the background fabric there to make it up. And the background fabric is cream, it's not white, because the whole Jelly Roll, which is this one here as well, this is the Jelly Roll, is actually cream. And I had cream in my stash. Again, it just worked out really, really well. I was so happy that I was like, oh yeah, everything is coming together really nicely. So again, so all the same size. Okay, so these 3 rows here are all the same size. And it's important to note that, because whatever size these 3 worked out as, okay, so the small sawtooth, the friendship star, and the other sawtooth, that equates what length additional you're going to add on for your yardage to make up your largest star there in the middle. Okay, so that equates that there. So that's important that you note that. And it's the same at the top there. So hopefully you can see that wide strip of background. Okay, and again, moving over to the other side is the same layout, because at the top there was our first 3 row. Okay, and when we look at the side, we see our small sawtooth, our friendship, and our other small sawtooth there. And then at the bottom, where you can't see, is the same additional 3 rows. At the top which is also at the bottom. And I'll just lift it up so you can actually see, because the quilt is so huge now, it's literally off the sides of the table. Okay, so that's literally it. So hopefully you can see it there and what I mean. So this is a lot of quilting space here and at the top there as well. So a lot of quilting space there, but I really wanted the star in the middle to stand out and to be noticeable. I think it's coming together really nicely. It looks absolutely beautiful, especially with the accent color. So don't be afraid to add another color to your jelly rolls to help raise the value of those colors and really help everything to contrast and lay out really beautifully together. And again, because the jelly roll itself came with cream, hence the reason why my background fabric now was cream again, so it helped everything to stand out. Okay, so that's where we're at. I have also decided to use a border, and so I'm using the same accent color for the borders. Okay, and again, that works out really lovely. So that's where we're at. I'm going to add on the borders, and then I'm going to get quilting, and then hopefully you can see the completed look of this Jelly Roll Starburst quilt. It's absolutely lovely, and I'll tell you a little story later on of how I actually came up with it. So in fact, I'll tell you at the introduction, because I haven't done the introduction as yet. So that's what I'll share with you, how this actually came about. Really funny story. But so that's where we're at, guys. So hopefully I've given you some tips. Now, what I just wanted to share with you again before I go is that the secret for making this starburst quilt is your 1/4 inch seam. I urge you, make sure your 1/4 inch seams are correct. And if you notice, on none of my stars I lost any of my points. All of my points are there. Nothing was cut off, even on the large stars. Nothing was cut off, yeah, and that's because my 1/4 inch seam was accurate. Very important. If your 1/4 inch seams are not accurate, you're going to have your points here cut off, yeah, and it's not going to look sharpish. And that's what we're aiming at, is to have all of those points really prominent, so you can see it standing out. But that's really when you're paying attention to your piecing of your fabrics. Okay, so very important. Another important tip is to, as you make your stars at each stage, press. Now, you know, I usually press at the end once I've made my block, and again, not too hot of an iron, just a warm iron. And the reason why I say that is because in my experience, I have experience whereby if the iron is too hot, it can distort the shape of the actual squares that you're making, of your blocks that you're making. So I have learned to just use a warm iron in between the stages of making my block up, and once I'm finished, then I will add a little bit of more steam and a little bit more heat to it. Okay, so but as I said, 1/4 inch seams and iron in between. And the reason why I'm saying is because, remember, we are making these from jelly rolls, and so there's a lot of seams at the back. Okay, it's a lot of stitching at the back. Okay, and everything must lay nice and flat. Take your time with it and really get it nice and flat, so that once it comes to the quilting, the process is a lot more easier. I think those are the tips I really wanted to share with you. I think that's what's really important. Now, the quilt top itself will stitch together very quickly. I will say, I think what was the most tedious part of this was the trimming down of the sizes. Once I've made all of these half square triangles, I think for me that's the most tedious part. I did get a bit bored and fed up of doing it. But once I finished that and I made the entire block themselves, stitching together the whole quilt top was literally done within about 15 minutes. So because the blocks are so big, it's stitched together very quickly. But the tedious part is literally getting all of those points really nice for your 1/4 inch seam and trimming down. So I think those are the intricate parts that will make the outcome of the quilt prominent and to show your skill level in terms of your 1/4 inch seams. So that's where we're at. Now I'm going to add on these things here, and then I'll show you the completed look, and hopefully it looks as good as it does now and even better, because obviously the quilting itself really lifts it and makes it give it another level of how the quilt looks. So let me go do that now, and then I will show you the completed look. So sit back and enjoy. So this quilt measures 65 by 87, and it's a beautiful size. It's a rectangular size, and obviously you knew that we're making a Jelly Roll Star Burst quilt, and obviously it speaks for itself. So I'm going to take you through some of the quilting patterns that I did, and so you can see how much time I spent on this particular piece of project. Now, as you can tell, we have the main star in the middle, and as well as the 4 hunter star on the side of the quilt, just to recap. Okay, followed by the 9-patch sawtooth in the middle, as well as the top there, friendship star, 2, 1 on each side, as well as the 4-patch for the sawtooth, as well as surrounded by the main star in the middle. So feathers was a very important element within the quilting, as well as some of the flower feathers. So I'll start on the 4-patch here, and just zoom in a little bit closer so you can see everything. So I just did dot to dot on these particular ones here, not too much, because I just really wanted to just outline the legs on the stars. On the borders, I did the wishbones, and I did that all around the stars, all around the blocks. So that happened on the 4-patch, as well as the 9-patch as well. I did that also. This again is another 4-patch, and again the same consistent sort of design around, and again with the wishbones there. Okay, for the friendship star, I did squiggly lines there on this particular jelly roll strips, and remember each of the block were surrounded by jelly roll strips as well as the background. And for the middle, I just did some swirls with peaks there, and in the corner I did a little particular pattern there as well, sort of bringing everything together. On this small strip of background fabric, I just did some swirls. So I did that. So each of the block was the same. So whatever I did on the left side, I did on the right side. Okay, so let's go down to the other star now, which is the medium star for the hunters. And again, as you can see, I did feathers all the way up, coming to the middle. On the other diamond here, what I did was just dot to dot, and again lines to follow that one. But these particular ones where the pinwheel, as you can see, is being made there, was I use the feathers on that just to highlight that pattern around each of the block. And so in the 4 square here, I did that sort of circular feather there. So in each of them had that. When it came to this one here, they all had these lines coming up, again radiating towards the center. That was the concept in my head behind it. Again, the same thing on this one here as well. And as you can see, that particular sort of flower feather there as well. So they all had the same sort of scheme, moving on to all of them really. Again, to the sawtooth, and it's the same. I did this particular pattern. I'm not sure you can actually see that there, but that ribbon candy, and again you can't see it. So if you're, if you've got really flowery patterns like that, sometimes it's not worth the effort putting too much quilting patterns, because it don't really come through unless you use a different color thread. And by the way, I use a very light cream for my thread color, because it's not white you're looking at, it's actual cream. So again, the same thing here. You can see a little bit of ribbon candy coming through a little bit, but dot to dots on each of the small 9 patch as well as the legs. And again, surrounding the blocks was the wishbones. Okay, on the borders I just did this sort of rose pattern, floral pattern there around the whole border. And again, I put my accent color for my border also. Same thing on this particular medium star. So remember, all 4 medium stars was in the corners of the quilt. So again, same design. So I kept it consistent in terms of the idea of the quilting patterns throughout each. So nothing was different really. Now in the middle, I did the same thing. So instead though, what I did for the feathers is going outward. So whereas with the feathers on the medium stars, they were coming from the end, radiating towards the middle. This one, it was going outwards. So that was the idea of that. I did the same sort of dot to dot line there. On the fabric here, where obviously there's a lot of quilting space, yeah, so I did very large feathers to make up that. And in between those feathers, so I did 3, so there's one there, there's another one there, and there's another one at the end. And in between that, I did the very same sort of floral rose shape feather in the circle to as a filler. Okay, and again I did it there on the corner. And for the quilting space on the legs there, I just did squiggly lines going up and down with this particular one, and again radiating towards the center. And I did that on all 4 of them. And the same quilting pattern on the other sort of quilting space at the top of the star. So again, your 3 feathers. Now on the border going around that particular square in the middle, what I actually did was this particular sort of quilting. I used rulers for that to get those lines, and then I did my free motion within the middle. So at the end I did those quilting lines there using a ruler, and that worked out really nice. I really liked the sort of pattern it gave for that, so I was really pleased with that particular one. So overall, the quilt is absolutely beautiful. My husband loves it, I love it. I did, as I said, spend a lot of time quilting it. As you can see for yourself, there is not 1 inch where there is no quilting at all. So all in all, it worked out really beautifully. The colors played together really nicely, and my accent color that I picked up also really worked together with it as well. So you can do that. So you don't necessarily have to use your jelly roll only. As I said before, you can just use an accent color, and of course the rest of the fabrics I made a cushion. As you can see, I didn't quilt it, it was just an envelope cushion that I actually made. But overall, it's a very lovely quilt, and it worked out really, really beautifully. It was really nice to make it. So I'll just zoom in a little bit so you can actually see a lot more of those quilting, because that really makes the quilt really, you know, once you've done the piecing, you know, what really shows up your piecing is those quilting. So please do like and subscribe and give it a thumbs up if you actually enjoyed this video. It always helps the channel and supports the channel to grow. I look forward to your comments, and please do share yours with me, you know, hashtag on my Instagram account, you know, Jelly Roll Star Quilt. So I'd love to see yours. I really would really love to see yours. I think this is a beautiful quilt. It looks absolutely gorgeous on the bed. I mean, just seeing it in real, touching it, feeling it, it's quite cuddly. And it's not a heavy, dense quilt. To my surprise, actually, I thought it would have been, but it's a nice wraparound, and I'm sure my husband would love it. And I have, as I mentioned at the beginning, have also labeled it for him and signed it as well. There we go. and I actually did that with the machine. I quilted it as well. When I say quilted it, I went on the I did the embroidery, stitched for letters, and actually wrote his name, etc. So that came out really beautifully. And at the back I did a doggy print because he likes dogs, and yeah, that's what it looks like. So all the quilting shows off at the back, so really, really lovely as well. So overall, a really nice quilt, and I look forward again, as I said, to yours. So do like and subscribe, hit that notification bell, and of course guys, happy quilting. Bye for now.